Well, good evening. If you're planning on the First Corinthians study tonight, a little bit of a change of plans. As you're watching this, I'm on my way back to Texas, and that is because my wife is going to be coming home a bit early. And with all of the kind of craziness that you've been watching and seeing in the news, getting out of LA is a good idea now. Things have changed where she's working, so rather than come out at the end of the month, she and I have decided to bring her home a little bit early. So as you see this, I'm going to be driving back with her from California to get out here. Now, with all of that said, I thought it would be a good idea to record this and address a few things, because needless to say, if you've been watching the news, there is a lot of panic that's going on out there. And with the people that I've talked to, I've said to them, I believe that this is an eschatological matter or an end times kind of a matter, but not in the way that I think a lot of people are looking at it. I personally don't think this has anything to do with the end of the world. The problems that are going on here, really by comparison to other things that we've faced, or even that we face on a normal daily basis. Let me give you some numbers. I think you might find these interesting. This year, I just looked at the CDC website, and this year, to this point, the CDC is saying that by their estimates, 36 million people have contracted the flu. There have been 370,000 hospitalizations, and they are estimating about 22,000 people have died this year, this flu season, from the common flu. If we look back to the last time that a virus like this, that's outside of just what's considered normal flu, the H1N1, by the middle of 2010 in this country, had affected 59 million people with 265,000 hospitalizations, and an estimated 12,000 people had died. Now, we know that this flu, or this coronavirus that's going around now, we know that China knew that they had a problem with this at the end of December. And so here we are about 3 months later, and the estimates right now are as many as 3,668 by the numbers of yesterday. People that have been infected, and about 68 dead, and I think that's gone up by maybe a factor of about 10 people. And even any one of those is tragic, there's no question about it. But if you look back at this and think, H1N1, we shut down nothing. Really, it was just, most people don't even remember that. That was 2009, 2010. Or just looking at what we had in the flu, the flu that's been going around has been devastating by comparison. 22,000 people dead as opposed to this less than 100 now. So when you think about it, why is it that there is such an incredible overreaction to this? Not just in the way that people are handling things and going and hoarding and all the rest of the things that you see going on with that, but day-to-day life is being changed, radically altered. This is going to have devastating effect as far as the economy is concerned, and who knows really where this goes. I have a trip planned to go to Israel at the end of April, and it could be very much in doubt depending on what governments do. I wouldn't be canceling the trip, nor would I refuse to go on it for fear of this coronavirus, because it just doesn't have that kind of lethal way about it that you see in most of these other examples of some very highly contagious and things that have been pretty deadly. And this one is pretty careful about who gets infected and the ones who have the worst reaction to it. So you've heard plenty of reporting on this, but why do I say it's an eschatological matter? Very simply put, for the people that are into the conspiracy theories and all the rest, that it's, you know, some government plot and all the rest of that, I don't buy into any of that. I don't buy into any of the conspiracies or any of the rest of it. But here's why I believe that it has a real end times kind of a feel to it. The things that we see in, especially in Revelation, when we know that the man of sin is finally revealed to the world, and when he sets up and does the things that he does, he really is able to command the entire world in what we would consider a very short amount of time. The tribulation is 7 years. We know that as Jesus had referred to, the Great Tribulation would be the second half of that. And when the Antichrist is able to set things up, you read about this in Revelation 13, really pretty much controls day-to-day life for the entirety of the planet. And so we see things in chapter 13 where it says, who is able to make war with him? And the idea that even the day-to-day commercial things will absolutely come to a stop, and there's a worldwide worship that takes place with it as well. Read it for yourself. It's found in chapter 13 of Revelation. But there's something that's really interesting that I want to point out to you, and it's found actually in Luke's Gospel. And it is Luke that records something in what we would consider, or what's called the Olivet Discourse, and it goes to something that Luke records that really you don't find anywhere else you don't find this in any of the other writings in the book of Matthew or in Mark. And it's in verse 25 of chapter 21, and it says this, and there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and on earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and waves roaring. Now clearly this is talking about a time when we are well into the tribulation, because now there's signs in the heavens, and that's not what's going on now. So you can read in the context, it's pretty clear that this happens during that 7 years, and when things really start to ramp up. But what's so interesting in this is the phrase there, distress in the nation with perplexity. These two words that are spoken about as one mentality of people. Now, the distress of the nations is this. Used one other time when Paul talks about his anguish. But literally in the Greek it means that there's a pressing together. There's that confinement. You feel constricted. The perplexity is that. It feels like we're hemmed in on all sides. We're being pressed in. But the perplexity that is mentioned there, or the distress rather, but it says that there's also a complexity, or perplexity rather, with it. It means we're hemmed in and we feel pressed, but we don't see a way out. There's no way to fix the problem. And so this talks about the people and the condition of them. This is a difficult time for the people here on earth, and it just seems like there's no solutions. That's why I believe that what we're looking at is the precursor to all of those kind of things. And here's what I mean by that. Look at how people are beginning to look for solutions to what's happening right now. Look at what the government is doing. Look what's happening in the stock market. Look at the things that are being proposed to fix the problem. People want their lives to go back to normal, and I'm sure that many of them would be willing to do just about anything to make that happen if they could just snap their fingers and make it go. In this case, that's not going to be taking place. There is a gross overreaction to this, and the governments are not doing what they can to curb that. So, of course, they're taking their steps, trying to make sure that we do as little, or as much as possible rather, to mitigate the problems early on so that we can bring it to a close quicker. And I'm glad that they're doing all of that. I wish that they would say it like that, rather than it being, we're doing this without a lot of explanation, and so it gives the conspiracy people a lot of room to be running around and saying the things that they do. So again, I believe that the day will come when something like this, what I see with all of the panic and the hysteria that's taking place, it's really being done in the absence of a real existential threat to humanity. Coronavirus is not that. At least not now. I mean, I may be feeling different about this months from now if it turns out to be something different. But it just doesn't have the makings of some worldwide plague that takes out people by the millions. That's already happened in our history. Spanish flu in the early 20th century killed tens of millions. And so this is nothing even remotely close to that. But yet, if you watch the way that people are reacting, it's certainly seeming that way. It's why I'm on a plane tomorrow to go to Orange County and to go get my wife, and then her and I have a 2-day drive ahead of us to get to where we are, just to get away from all of the panic and the hysteria. So I just thought it would be a kind of an interesting thing on a Thursday night. We'll be getting back in later this week, and at that time I will get the 1 Corinthians study that we've been going through. I'll get that recorded and put up. It'll just be a couple of days late. But I wanted to throw this out there just as a matter of perspective. Again, we look at this and say, the Lord is in control at all times. And so it is in Him we trust. It is in Him whom we have faith. And really, when this thing is all said and done, it just doesn't have the appearance of things that really measure up to all of the panic that you see taking place. So do what you can, keep your immune systems up, and do all the things that you know support that part of your system, and do the things, washing your hands, do the things that make sense to try to keep yourself away from all of the viral things that are taking place. But have a little perspective and look at the way that things are year by year. This really does seem to be a lot more of hype and of hysteria than it is of actual events on the ground. So be praying that the Lord gives wisdom to the powers that be in our country and in other countries, and that we start to look at this objectively and not through the prism of panic and public sentiment. They should be doing what they can to try to put these things into some kind of a historical context and a perspective, because that's just not being done. Instead, we're feeding into people's fears. Again, I guess I'll say this as an in closing type of thing. It would seem to me that this is why I would not think that this is a government-driven kind of a problem. This, to me, seems to have much more of a spiritual component, a trying of the waters, if you will, to find out just how much, when you panic people, they're willing to give over. Because the day's going to come when some kind of crisis much grander than this, and who knows, it may be a number of different things, but if people think that there is a solution that is being offered to them, they will go running to it. And so we see that already now with some clinical trials that are taking place with this for a vaccine for it. And we see that there are a lot of things that are being promised, and people are just wanting their lives back to normal. But it seems like we have suspended reason and common sense in this, and rational thought. We are just jumping onto the bandwagon and really feeding in more to the paranoia and the hysteria that really doesn't need to be there. So with that, I'm off to California tomorrow and be back in a couple of days from that. And I will be updating you on the Corinthians passage, and look forward to seeing you when we're back in town. May God bless you, and let's pray that God brings this to resolution very soon. Amen? See you soon.